Hello, and we are live. So welcome to another broadcast. It's Troy Francis. Welcome to my channel. I wanted to do Gold Zero. I've not done one of these for a little while. Over the last few weeks, I've been sort of doing the CAD Academy launch and the CAD Academy webinars, which I was doing, of course, the week before last, and then last week, just sort of like taking it a little bit easy. And then this week, well, back into the saddle, right? But what I wanted to talk about today is really the easing of the lockdowns. I suppose you might call it the Great Awakening, if you like, because I think we're now seeing finally a little bit of traction here. I think finally we're now seeing this thing start to change, start to ease. People's behaviors are starting to shift and alter accordingly. And as a result of that, obviously, we are starting to sort of go back to normal. So what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? What are we all going to do about it, if you like? Because now we are starting to see the golden shoots of opportunity, if you like, start to emerge after the sandy, arid desert of boredom and misery and hardship that we've all had to endure over the last few weeks and, I suppose, months. So I'm in London. I'm in the UK, and what's been happening here? Well, they've slowly started to ease lockdown here, which was happening anyway, and now this has been massively exacerbated because there's been a big scandal. There's been a couple of scandals here, actually. The first scandal was with the dude who, from Imperial College, Dr. Neil Ferguson, who actually first initiated and implemented and came up with the modelling, which suggested that there was going to be 500,000 deaths. Potentially there could be 500,000 deaths in the UK as a result of coronavirus if nothing was done. And it was on the basis of that study that the UK chose to implement lockdown. And I think the United States followed suit off the back of that, and other countries as well. So incredibly influential. And then, of course, or not of course, but then what happened was that this guy, Neil Ferguson, basically decided that he would have a little bit of rumpy-pumpy with his married lover. So she was coming over to his place and they were having trysts together, and this all came out. And then he immediately fell on his sword, or rather she'd been probably falling on his sword, and then he fell on his sword and he resigned from SAGE, which is the body that is what's the word? You know what I'm saying? That is instructing and advising the UK government. So he did the right thing and he removed himself from that position of power. But what we've seen since is Dominic Cummings, who is a highly, highly influential advisor to Boris Johnson in the UK government. And he has been caught out just recently, really just in the last few days, having taken a trip during the lockdown period. Now, with him, to be fair, it wasn't kind of that he was going to go and see some married lover or anything like that. With him, it was a little bit more, there was more of an excuse for him because he was doing it for his family. He wanted to take his wife and his 4-year-old son out of London and up to a place called Durham, which is in a bit more in the north of England. And so there was, I won't go into all the ins and outs of the story, but there was a bit more justification for it. But nevertheless, this dude was on the SAGE body that has instructed or advised the UK government to implement lockdown across the nation, across the 4 nations, if you like. So again, you can understand people's frustration with this guy because, basically everyone else has been sort of, well, not everybody else, but a lot of, most people have been sort of like following the rules. And we've had this lockdown that's been in place for, a couple of months, coming up to, I think it's like 9 weeks now or something. And this dude broke the rules, and he broke them in a number of different ways. And even when he yesterday came out and sort of, we didn't really apologize, but he came out and explained what had happened. He talked through the different ramifications of what had happened and sort of tried to sort of put his side of the story, if you like. It's still clear that he'd broken some rules, it looks like, and so people are pissed off. And look, and anyway, even aside from all of that, right, people are just sick of being locked down. People are gagging for freedom. And this thing with Dominic Cummings, and I suppose the thing with Neil Ferguson before that, have just been the final nails in the coffin of lockdown, really. So anyway, what all of that is a big preamble, because I don't really want to talk about UK politics here. But all of that is the precursor to the fact that now I think lockdown in the UK is pretty much dead, really. I think we are now just in the last death throes of it, if you like. They've now set out the fact that I think schools are going to be starting to open next week. They're talking about opening shops on the 15th of June, and so on and so forth. And I think by July, it's likely we're going to start to get back to something approaching normal, although we might be expected to wear masks in certain places and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, right, some form of normality seems to be coming back. So what's happening on the continent? What's happening in mainland Europe? Well, mainland Europe is starting to open up as well. So we heard the news last night that Spain is now no longer going to enforce quarantine, apparently, for people going to visit Spain. And Spain is starting to open up. And I think by July, Spain is going to be open as well. Germany has been relatively sort of open throughout the whole thing, but they are sort of easing up as well. We've got other countries like, I think Slovenia is now open. Belarus has been open for the whole time, pretty much. They've got a quarantine in place. But you know what I mean? It's starting now to sort of ease up. And so many people will be looking at this, and they'll be looking at their sort of travel plans, and they'll be thinking, well, what can I do? What can we, can I get away? Where can I go? Blah, blah, blah. United States of America, I think Trump has been pretty keen to get things open really as soon as possible. Obviously, that's starting to happen in certain states now, certain states less so. But I think the trend is, we can see where this is going. And Japan as well, I believe yesterday, dropped their lockdown. I'm not entirely clear to if everything's back to normal, but certainly it's getting that way. So, bottom line is we are seeing an end to this. We're seeing things returning to something like the status quo. And this is what I've been saying all along, right? This is the whole thing, right? It was always going to end. It was always going to be a moment in time. And what I sort of suggested at the beginning of this whole thing was that people use this opportunity in order to improve themselves. They use this opportunity in order to do something, good. Because look, I mean, there isn't really a lot you can do. If they shut the whole planet down, right, then you kind of just got to take it on the chin and go, okay, listen, they've shut the whole planet down, pretty much. There's not a lot of fun to be had anywhere. So I may as well use this opportunity to self-improve, to do some work on myself, to kind of make some money, to do exercise, maybe to work out, or to get myself right spiritually, or whatever it is, right? You want to use this time to work on yourself. But what we need to be doing now is thinking, okay, there is now an end to the tunnel in sight. Okay, there is now an opportunity, it looks like, quite soon, to go out and start to live a relatively normal life again. So what you need to be thinking about now is, are you ready for that? Are you in the right frame of mind? Have you got the mindset down? Of course, if you're on CAD Academy, then you absolutely will, because one of the big things in that course, I mean, that course is basically a mindset course. That course is basically about getting yourself into the right frame of mind in order to go out and perform at a very high level socially. Okay. And that's what we went through over the last week or so with the guys. And we still have the Telegram group going at the moment. We still have the Facebook group going. But if you weren't in that, then what you need to be doing at the moment is thinking, right, so how can I get into the right mindset? Do I have that killer mindset ready to hit the ground running when we come out of this thing? And that goes in terms of dating, and it also goes in terms of business and every other element of your life, really, as well, because it feels like we've all been on a bit of a sabbatical. I mean, certainly the UK, people kind of have been on a sabbatical because the government's been paying everyone's wages, or most of everyone's wages. So there has been this sense that it's all kind of been a bit of a big holiday, right? But that holiday is coming to an end. And so you have to be prepared to hit the ground running. And this is the thing, right? You need to be prepared to salvage the year. We should make that a hashtag, like salvage the year, salvage the summer, or something like that. Because, unfortunately, because of the nature of events, we've had to kind of lose a couple of months this year, which is unfortunate, but there it is. That's just what happens. But we certainly don't want to be losing any more of it due to our own inactivity or our own lack of motivation. There's a funny thing happened yesterday, right? So I was with my girlfriend, and we went down to Clapham Common, which is in South London, big park in South London. So we were down there, and we were kind of enjoying some sunshine, having a bit of ice cream, and sunbathing, doing a bit of reading, whatever. And there's this kind of like little wooded area on one of the sides of this particular park, and we walked past it, or we walked through it to find somewhere to sit, and there was some sort of activity going on in this wooded area. Couldn't really quite see what it was. And as we got nearer to I could see some people in front talking. There was a girl, and she was talking to somebody within the wooded area. And as we got nearer, right, we saw that this girl was having a chat with a guy who was standing inside this like little wooded area, little mini, some trees and some shrubbery and stuff like that. And the guy was having a piss, right? The guy was urinating. And he was obviously trying to chat up the girl, because I heard, as we walked past, I heard him say to the girl, "So can I have your number?" And she goes, "I'm not going to give my number to some bloke who's got his dick in his hand." And I just started laughing, and the girl clocked me, and she's laughing as well. And she's like, "No, well, it's right, isn't it? I'm not going to give my number to some bloke who's got his knob in his hand, right? Am I? Which I thought was quite funny. It was like a little classic little London-y type moment. She had a bit of a Cockney accent, I think, so it kind of added a sort of element to it. But on a serious note, what it signaled to me was that the dating scene is starting to wake up. Okay, people are starting to, I mean, clearly this guy had his dick in his hand. He's having a piss, but he wasn't afraid to. He certainly wasn't thinking about social distancing. Right? He'd asked this girl for her number, and she ostensibly said no. Although I think actually, I wonder what happened after we walked past. I think maybe she would have actually ended up giving the number, right? So there was a real carnival atmosphere out there as well yesterday. Like, it was like a big party. People were dressing up. It was really weird. It was almost like in London, we have this big thing, Notting Hill Carnival, which is every August. And people kind of go to that, and they all dress up, and they wear fancy outfits, and it's a big like party, and there's music in the streets and everything. And it really felt like that yesterday down there. It was really crazy. And nothing had been organized, because obviously you're not supposed to organize big events or anything, but it really felt like it had been organized. There were all these guys out just dancing, and kind of there was music playing and stuff like that. Really crazy atmosphere. And I think what that demonstrates to me, at least, is what I've been saying all along, is that at the end of this, what you're going to do is find is there's going to be this massive explosion of activity, of kind of, because you can't keep the human spirit like pent down for too long. It's just not going to work, right? It's gonna come out. It's going to explode out, because the things that drive people, the desires to meet, to mingle, to socialize, to dance, to party, to date, to have sex, all of those kinds of things, those things aren't going to go away. You can maybe suppress them for a bit, but they are so intrinsic to the human condition that it's just they're never going to be eradicated. And because they've been pushed down for the last 2 or 3 months, just explosion. And I think I saw like a little element of that yesterday in London, and I'm sure that's happening elsewhere across the world as well. So if you're out and about, and you're wanting to socialize, you're wanting to meet people, and you're wanting to bring new people into your life, then now is a really, really fertile time to do that, because the demand is so high, because supply's been suppressed, hasn't it? It's the old economics lesson, right? Supply's been suppressed because of the lockdown, because nobody's been allowed out, and now all of a sudden, supply they're taking the brakes off of supply, and so there's a lot of demand out there. There's a lot of pent up demand, and you need to be in a position to take advantage of that, right? And basically, it's about you need to be looking at the material at the moment. You need to be watching videos like the videos on this channel. If you're in one of the groups, like you're in John MLD's group or anything like that, then that's great. You need to be like sharpening the sword at the moment, ready to go out into battle, because I can tell you, having observed it with my own eyes, this is going to be a crazy, crazy time. I think over the next weeks and months, we're really going to see an explosion of activity, which is what I predicted all along. And actually, there's a historical precedent for this as well, because I've been reading Daniel Defoe's book. So Daniel Defoe was the English novelist, 17th century writer, a novelist and businessman and other things. He's the guy that wrote Robinson Crusoe, but he also wrote another really interesting book called Journal of the Plague Year, which was written about the year 1665. It came out some years later. I think it came out in the early 1700s. But it is what it says. It's a journal of a year when the plague took over London, this terrible, terrible disease. And it was much, much worse than COVID. But it's really, really interesting to read because there's a lot of parallels between what was happening back then, even though that was hundreds of years ago, and what's happening now. But one of the things that he said, which I read just recently, just this morning, I think, was he said, as the infection rate started to go down, as it became clear that London was coming out of this thing and that people were suddenly less scared. They were more just like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to socialize. I don't care anymore. And he said their vices and their iniquities started to grow even to an even greater level than they had been before the whole disaster happened. So, again, human nature doesn't change that much. That was hundreds of years ago. But we're going to see the same thing now, right? So he said their vices and their iniquities, the naughty things that they did just started to explode as soon as the infection rate started to go down. As soon as they were like, listen, we can go out now. Things are back to normal or getting back to normal. It was like, off the chart. So we're going to be seeing that for sure. And you guys, you need to be ready to take advantage of that. So JD says, I'm surprised by the sudden moves to reopen tourism in the Mediterranean. Yeah, it's a good point, right? So I've got a friend who has been in Ibiza, living on Ibiza, or however you want to pronounce it, the island of Ibiza, the big party island off the coast of Spain, in the Balearic island of that name. And she said to me that it was really weird, right? Because I saw an article last week saying Ibiza is opening up again. And she didn't know anything about it because she's been there all through this whole thing. And she said, well, that's the news to me. We're still being locked down. I think they were only being allowed out once a day or something at that point. The lockdown in Spain was a lot stricter than in the UK. You had to, I think, have documentation to go out the house at one point. It was very closely regulated. I think at one point that you weren't even allowed to do exercise, which you were always allowed to do here. So it was really, really strict. Anyway, I suddenly see this announcement saying that Ibiza is kind of going to be opening or starting to open up. And I believe it has now. I think that some little bars and cafe bars with outside parts have started to open now. But it struck me, I mean, it's a bit of a coincidence. Apparently the infection rate there was incredibly low. I think it was very, very minimal. I think the death rate was extremely low. I think it was in single figures, if at all. But nevertheless, it struck me. This is really convenient, isn't it? That this news that suddenly somebody in the Spanish government or somebody in the Ibizan council or whatever had said, yes, we've now luckily reached the point where we can open up again. We can open up. And I thought, well, that's very convenient, isn't it? Right at the beginning of the summer season. Because somewhere like Ibiza, I mean, their whole economy really is driven by the summer. It's driven by people coming over and visiting in about a 6-month window between May and October, November. And that's it. And then nothing happens the rest of the year. So for them to be closed over summer would be, or for it to eat too much into the summer, would just be a complete catastrophe. And, it's this whole thing about economy versus, risk of infection or whatever. And, in the end, I mean, I'm not saying that the economy is more important than people's health. Of course not. But it's not really a binary opposition, right? I mean, people have got to have a livelihood. People have got to, continue to exist in some sort of normal life and bring money in to pay their mortgages and their bills and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you know all of this. I'm not saying anything new here, but it did strike me. It was very convenient that suddenly, just in time for summer, Ibiza was opening up again. And of course, we're seeing that now across the Mediterranean. I mean, it does, in a way, it does seem a bit sudden. But then on the other hand, my sense of things is that it appears from everything that I've read and everything that I've observed that this is now starting to. Daniel Defoe has a good expression for this. He says the distemper or the illness, the distemper was losing its poignancy. And I think we can see that now, or its malignancy, maybe. You know, the distemper was losing its malignancy, and I think we can see that now. It just feels like it is receding. Now, whether there'll be a big second wave, I don't know. It certainly looks from different countries that there hasn't been much of a second wave thus far in the short term. Whether there'll be one in the winter, who knows? Maybe there will. But at the moment, I think we are seeing it start to recede, and that's kind of the natural pattern of things, isn't it? You know, things flare up, and then they're very bad for a bit, and then they start to recede, and it feels like that's what's happening here, which is obviously good news for everybody. But yeah, it does seem pretty quick. I agree, and it remains to be seen what happens. So Ali says, how important is it to learn a game from one teacher system as a beginner? Well, I think it's quite important, actually, but not because varying systems are necessarily wrong. It's not because if I said something that's definitely right, and if somebody else says something that's definitely wrong. You know, I think you can learn a lot from all kinds of different people, and this goes for any area of study, by the way. You know, I think that there is much to be said for having a diverse range of sources and taking your material from a diverse range of people with differing experiences and differing even results, but, you know, differing kind of like mindsets and where they're coming from. I think that's valuable. Having said that, the huge problem that you have in this space, the huge problem that you've got in this endeavor is paralysis by analysis. That is to say, getting so wound up with thinking about all of this stuff and imbibing all of this material from different people and getting stuck in your head that you don't actually go and do anything. Cheers. And that is incredibly damaging because, you know, any sort of social art, and dating is a social art, the conversation is a social art, charisma is a social art, all of these things, they don't exist in a vacuum. It's not something that you can just do in your bedroom and get good at it. You know, you have to involve other people and you have to go out and actually do it. Otherwise, you know, you're never going to get any better. You're never going to improve. And so I think it's good to try to minimize, in a way, at the beginning, the number of people that you look to with this stuff, because otherwise you can just, there's a danger at least that you can just not do anything and let yourself off the hook. Now, it depends, having said that, how disciplined you are, because when I was studying this stuff, I read lots and lots of different things, but I was also taking action the whole time. So I used to pretty much every day for years, really, I would read at least one thing, and sometimes a lot of different articles and texts and things like that, about theories, about technique, about all of this stuff. But I was also taking the action. And so both of the things sort of reinforced one another, right? Because ideally what you want to be doing is that you're taking in somebody's content, or you're taking content about this stuff, and then you're going out and actioning it, and then you're seeing, well, does it work or not? Did that thing that person said is really great and I should be doing it? Did that thing actually work in the real world or not? And, you know, results may vary, right? I mean, something that works very well for me may not work very well for you, and vice versa. So you want to be going out there and testing it. But the key thing is to be taking the action. It's been said before that this area is 90% perspiration. You know, it's 90% going out there and doing stuff, and 10% theory. And I think that's probably about right, to be honest. The theory is all very interesting, and there's a lot of great content that people have made in video form and books and all, you know, I mean, there's a great treasure trove of all of this stuff, and it's interesting in its own right. But, you know, this isn't about studying, this isn't like a degree course, right? This isn't a bachelor's of art in, you know, in pickup. This is about actual real life experience and going out and doing it. So you have to be motivated to actually go out as well. So I would say minimize it if you can. If you're very disciplined and you're taking the action anyway, then it's fine to take in different influences, but don't be too dogmatic about it as well, right? Don't fall into the trap of like, well, it's got to be this method and it's got to be, because rules are meant to be broken, particularly in this, with this stuff, right? People devise frameworks. I mean, a classic example of this is something like the London day game model, which was devised, well, I say devised, which was collated and popularized, let's say, by Tom Torero, Nick Krauser, and various other people who are around at that time in the space. And it's a great model. You know, it's a 5-step model that is the rudiments of everything you need to know, not just for daytime approach, but also really for any kind of approach, to be honest. You know, so it's that material, that model is fantastic. Having said that, do you need to follow it slavishly all of the time for the rest of your life? No, of course you don't. And even Tom willingly will say that openly. You know, he said to me, you know, people think this thing is like some sort of a gospel. This is kind of like manna handed down from heaven, and it isn't. You know, these are training wheels, right, that you use for a period of time until you have the confidence to freestyle. You've got the confidence to do your own thing. You know, I mean, like, who would ever advise that you're having a pee in a forest and you got your dick out and then some girl walks past and you ask her for her number? I mean, nobody would ever make a video to suggest that as a technique. Nobody would ever write a book about that. And yet there's a good chance that for that dude, it ended up working because it was very audacious. And I'm sure that he had other stuff. You know, he was perhaps a good looking guy and he was perhaps had some charisma and something about him, and he was being very cheeky and cocky. And maybe that worked. I can't say for definite it worked, but I think there's a possibility that it did. That is not something you would ever get from, you know, a system of game, a system of dating. That's not something that a coach would ever tell you to do. But it can work, right? So it's all sort of down to the individual. It's down to your personality. It's down to the context of the situation and the interaction at the time. You can get away with all kinds of things, you know. And actually, part of the fun of this is pushing it and seeing what you can get away with, because it's pretty crazy, right? But you know, so the training wheels are there for the beginning. But after that, they start to become less useful until in the end, you're pretty much doing your own thing. But here's the thing, right? To double back on itself, in order to teach it, there needs to be some sort of model, because you can't really, as somebody who's a coach or somebody who's creating content, you can't really just say, well, yeah, just go out and do whatever, because that advice is the same quality as saying, well, just be yourself. You know, if it was as simple as to just be yourself, then nobody would ever need that material, right? Because they would just do whatever they wanted to do and it would work. And that clearly doesn't happen. So you need the training wheels at the beginning, and the coach needs the training wheels as well to have something, a framework to hang it on. But, you know, in the end, you have to break away from that. You know, what's the old saying about the student always ends up killing their teacher, or something like that? You know, it's sort of like, you know, in the end, you transcend whoever teaches you, and you do your own thing. And that is equally valid. Okay. You know, you don't need to sort of be tied to a system. Exactly. Jack says, hi Jack, how's it going? When's the Premier League back? I don't know, actually. That I don't know. I know they've been talking about it, because I've seen various people on TV talking. Where are you based in the UK, or are you based out? I'm guessing you might be based outside the UK. Anyway, I know they're talking about it, and I think, actually, don't quote me on this, but I think they may have been given the go-ahead to start. But the way that they're going to do it is going to be very, very sanitized. So they're going to test all of the players and everything, and they're going to do it without a crowd. So they're going to do it in closed environments, and they're not going to have any audience there, but they're going to broadcast it. I think that's been given the go ahead, but I don't know anything about dates yet, or any of that kind of stuff. Right. So Bruno says, what's the goal when using indirect as opposed to direct? Well, okay. So this is such a classic issue. This is such a classic question. It comes up all of the time, but it's, you know, it's a good question. It's the eternal question, really. I mean, broadly speaking, right? So what he's talking about here is when you approach somebody that you find attractive, or do you go up to them directly and say, hey, I just saw you, I think you're very attractive, I wanted to have a conversation with you? Or do you go indirectly? Do you go up and say, oh, listen, you make some sort of excuse to speak? So an example of that is you might say, where's the local Starbucks, or where's the local Tesco's, or something like that. You ask for directions. Or you might just go up and say, oh, it's nice dress. Looks like you're into tennis. Are you a tennis player? Have you seen that they've cancelled Wimbledon this year? It sucks, doesn't it? You know, and you make some sort of tangential remark that opens the conversation, but isn't directly saying, I'm interested in you, right? Both of them can work. You know, it doesn't have to be an either or thing. Having said that, and the goal, I think, for both of them should be the same, really. I mean, the goal ultimately is because you want to get to know this person more, so you want to probably get contact details, and then set up a date or a meeting or a coffee or whatever at a later date. You know, the goal is fundamentally the same. It's not so much about the goal; it's more about the context, right? And there will be some contexts where it's just better to go indirect, and there's going to be other contexts where you might as well go direct. Okay, going direct often is advantageous because it looks very ballsy and it looks like you're somebody who knows what they want and you don't mess around and you just go up and you tell it how it is and all of that. And that can be really advantageous. Indirect, however, is probably most guys' preferred method. It's perhaps the more socially acceptable method in a sense. And there's something to be said for it because if you do it right, it gives you a little bit of breathing space in order to showcase something of your personality before you take things in the direction that you want to take them, which is, you know, towards the sort of flirty, if you like. So both can work, both can be great. It kind of depends on the circumstances. You know, if you've got to be socially calibrated, right? You've got to be socially savvy. If you are in a situation where clearly there's perhaps a lot of eyeballs on you and her, and it's going to be embarrassing perhaps for her, and or maybe she's with colleagues or something like that, and it's just going to be socially awkward, then you may as well make it easy. You know, on her, you may as well go for indirect because you don't want to be like going out straight out there and like bang, you know, because that could be seen to be uncalibrated and perhaps even a bit creepy or whatever. So you don't want to do that. You need to just judge the situation really and decide which works best for you. Having said that, I always recommend direct because when you can do it, that is when it's appropriate to do it, because it just seems more. It's just more. You're being honest, right? Fundamentally, you know, you're being congruent with your authentic self, and you are being, you know, you're just being honest. You're just going up and telling it like it is. You know, this is why I've come to talk to you. You know, this is it. If you're not into that, that's fine. I'll go on my merry way. But this is what the deal is, right? There's a lot to be said for that. And as I say, if you do it with confidence and you do it in a powerful way, then that can be very, very effective indeed. But you've got to own it, right? You've got to, you know, you've got to have your balls, and you've got to be like, right, this is, you know, and just own it and front it. Because if you don't, then it can be awkward. So yeah, you just got to decide really for yourself, but experiment with doing both. That's the thing, you know, try going out and doing 10 of one and then 10 of the other and see which one you feel more comfortable with. The difficulty with indirects, of course, is that you have to transition it at some point from whatever you went in with. So if you went in, you were talking about her, you know, Apple laptop, or, you know, the exhibition at the Tate, or the fact that it's been difficult to get artichokes during lockdown or something like that, then that's fine. And you've started a conversation, which is good. But at some point, you're then going to have to transition that into what you actually want to talk about, which is you and her going for a drink. So just be aware of that and just prepare some sort of a transition. Okay. And again, the way I recommend, and I think the simplest way, is just to own it and just to say, listen, you know, it's been great talking to you about those lockdown artichokes, but, you know, the truth of the matter is, I think you're really cute. I would love to get to know you more. So why don't we X, Y, Z? So yeah, just be aware of that, because otherwise you can be in danger of starting the conversation and it going quite well, but then you don't really know how to transition, and you end up kind of having to walk away, or you know, and the worst thing you can do as well is that you find yourself getting quite good reactions from her. And then because you don't want to spoil it, you then don't lay it on the line. You don't then say, well, actually, this is what the deal is. I'd like to see you. Here's, you know, give me your number. Let's meet up during the week. You don't do that. And then the whole thing's been a waste of time. And you'll feel even worse if you don't do that transition, because then you're going to think, well, I was quite close. I was so close, and then I messed it up. And that's not how you want to feel. So yeah, those are the things that you need to think about. I wonder if anyone else has said anything. Greetings from Kenya. Amazing. Jaden, good to see you, man. How are you? What's the vibe in Kenya? Are you, how's the lockdown situation over there, or have you been released? Let me know how things are going. Oh, he's answered it here. Still lockdown probably till mid-June. I think mid-June is what they're saying for Europe as well. So that seems to be pretty standard, I think. I mean, there's this whole thing about lockdown, really. There are a lot of skeptics towards it. And I've been reading quite a lot of the stuff with some interest. And there is the argument that actually, if you look at places where lockdowns weren't imposed, like Sweden, the curve has been pretty similar to what you get in countries where there have been lockdowns. And then there's this whole question of, well, was it ever the right policy in the first place? And I've always been a bit skeptical about it. I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I don't want to, it's not necessarily the hill I'm going to die on, but it's always seemed to me to be something that should at least be questioned, quite intensively, because of course the economic effects that we're seeing of this, I mean, God, I just hope that we get back to normal pretty quickly and things start to pick up, and perhaps they will. I don't know. I've seen some pretty dire predictions, but you can't really shut down the whole world for months on end and not have any ramifications of that. It's an unprecedented, thing, and yeah, here's to see what happens. So Myron from Unplug Fitness is here to support. Like this video, guys. Hi, Myron. I hope you're well. I hope you are having a good day. Let us know how things are going in Miami. Myron's based in Miami. Does a lot of night game out there when things are back to normal. Obviously, at the moment, those guys are on lockdown as well, unfortunately. But hopefully, things are starting to ease. MLD, how do I stop my crippling existential anxiety? There is no way. If you are subject to crippling existential anxiety, then sadly, the only solution for you is to seek out black pill videos and to watch them obsessively all day in a darkened room before crying yourself to sleep and masturbating to old pictures of Cyndi Lauper. There is no other solution to that crippling anxiety that you speak of. Of course, I'm only joking. Don't do that. If you are, I know he's joking, but if you are suffering from, well, I suppose existential anxiety, I mean, I suffer from that a lot, or I did suffer from that a lot, this feeling of like purposelessness and everything else. I mean, you need to just grab life by the balls, to be honest. I mean, what you need to realize, what you need to understand is that there is no great purpose to this. There is no sort of amazing significance to the universe. The second law of thermodynamics indicates that the universe will die in great fire. The heat death of the universe, I think they call it. That will transpire at some point. Hopefully not in the next half an hour before I finish this video, but it will certainly transpire at some point. And then everything that has ever been created in this universe, every aspect of this universe will be eradicated forever. And of course, when you die, your consciousness dies with you. And so you have no awareness either of your so-called legacy or of the fact that you ever lived. So anything that you achieved in this life, it all comes to naught. Which is kind of depressing. I should leave it there, shouldn't I? All right, I'll say goodbye. Bye. I'm only joking. So you can look at that in two ways, right? You can say, well, that's a bit depressing. That doesn't sound very cheery. That's a bit miserable. What am I going to do about that? Am I going to start watching black pill videos, and am I going to be very depressed and start writing long ranting comments on people's live streams and things like that? Well, you can do that if you want. It's a free country, right? But that's not the route I would recommend. I would instead suggest that, as Camus says in The Myth of Sisyphus, that you lean into the absurdity of the human condition, that you actually grasp life by the balls and just say, well, no, sod it. I mean, yes, this is all kind of random. It is all kind of, in the bigger scheme of things, pointless. But that doesn't mean that every human life is pointless. While you're here, you can have an amazing time. While you're here, you can achieve amazing things. You can have fantastic experiences, both in terms of work, in terms of the sensual, the sexual, in terms of the creativity, success. I mean, there are many, many amazing things that can happen to you while you are here. If you do the work, as Rich Cooper would say. So yeah, lean into that. Don't bother thinking about the greater significance of it. It doesn't really matter that there isn't greater significance. In fact, in a way, it frees you up more, because what does any of it matter, right? What does it matter if you go and speak to that girl that you like at the party and she rejects you? Well, who cares, right? I mean, it's less than meaningless. It doesn't even figure on the chart. Okay, and this should free you rather than be something to get all down about and to get all sort of miserable about. And then Ali says, that's my current situation. I become Inaction because I feel like I need to learn more. I think that might be a reference to what John MLD said, or it might be oh, actually, wait a minute. What does he say here? My excuse is that I'm living in a small city with not a lot of options. I don't go out and approach. I'm going to start with saying hi consistently. Yeah, do that, right? I mean, look, there's been clearly, it's been an unprecedented period because of lockdown. So it's been very difficult to do anything approaching normal socializing anyway, right? That's just how it's been. But as things start to ease up, you can get back into it. And yeah, he's exactly right. If you find it cripplingly difficult, if you are sort of stunned into inactivity, because you're just very nervous and you just find it really, really difficult, then you need to start slow. You need to do baby steps, and just going and saying hi to people. That is an amazing way to start, right? You need to get the engines running, okay? And you can't necessarily go 0 to 100 in 10 seconds. Then don't try. Instead, do something easy. Make it easy on yourself. Lower the bar. Don't think that you have to be, you have to sort of ace it and do this kind of like YouTube video worthy performance the first time that you go out, because you don't. Just lower the damn bar. Make mistakes. Mess it up. I mean, who cares, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, nobody's gonna. Okay, look, let me rephrase that. If you live in a very small town and you know everybody, then people might remember. And if that's the case, then you probably need to move. But if you're in a reasonably big town or a large city or a densely populated metropolis, nobody gives a damn, right? What happens? Just go out, make mistakes, fuck it up. It doesn't. Who cares, right? Go. In fact, go out with the intention of messing it up. Go out and say, right, I'm going to mess this up as badly as I can because it'll be funny, and do that 20 times and see what happens. See how you feel at the end of it. It could go either way. If you allow it to, you could get really, really down in the dumps about it. You could start experiencing that existential dread, existential anxiety that we talked about before, and that could be a real bummer. But on the other hand, what you might find is that actually you get very energized by it. You get hyped up. You start to think, well, hang on a minute. Actually, I could see the green shoots of hope there. I could see some possibilities there, and sod it. I'm gonna lean into this, because I'm not gonna. Here's what you can end up feeling like. You might end up feeling like, and this is when you go out and you say hi to people consistently, and then you start to try to some mini approaches, and they don't always go well or whatever. What can happen is at the end of that, you get vibed up, you get into the momentum, you get into that flow state, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, do you know what? I'm not going to go down like that. I'm going to go down fighting. I'm going to just ramp this up until I get something approximating what I want. And when you get into that mindset, that's really, really powerful. And suddenly you can't be pushed down anymore, and you've lost that fear. And now you're doing it not to try to people please other people. You're doing it because that fire is ignited within you. But sometimes you need to sort of ease yourself into it before the fire starts to ignite. Okay. Somebody says, yeah, well, I think that's all been covered. I mean, the thing about that is, right, I'm good friends with Tom, and he's a great guy, but also his abilities are spot on. And I can say that because I've hung out with him and I've seen him in person. So, I don't think there should ever be any doubt about that. I mean, people do things that sometimes and sort of that maybe they regret it or whatever. So what? I mean, as I say, the proof is in the pudding. And, I've been out with that dude. I've seen what he's done. I've met people that he's dated, all this kind of thing, and he is, he's bang on. He knows what and the other thing is as well, his content is good. I mean, his content is really, really damn good. And it's fortunately, he's started to put stuff back up on his channel now. A lot of it's in the vault. He's got this private members area, which has got some great stuff in it. But he started to put a lot of stuff back up on YouTube now. And I think that's really good because his stuff is like, his content is great. He articulates it really well. He explains it really well. He really knows what the hell he's talking about. So he is a great resource to go to for sure if you want to learn about daytime approach. Somebody's saying I sound like a Ricky Gervais. Yeah, I saw the first. So we saw the first series of that. The first series was really good. It was a little bit of a downer, but it was really good. I mean, his stuff is always great, and he always does that bittersweet thing really well, doesn't he? Where it's kind of sad, it's kind of melancholy, but it's also very funny. And I saw the first series. Seen, I think, episode 1 of the second series. Haven't seen the rest of the second series yet because again, it's one of those things. I mean, he's a genius and it's brilliant. But it also can be a little bit of a downer, but I need to watch the rest of it for sure. So I will crack onto that. The other thing about him, by the way, is he had some really good music in it as well. One of the ones in the first series, he had a Nick Cave song in it. I really like Nick Cave, the Australian singer. Ricky Gervais has great taste in music. He used to work in the music industry. He used to manage Suede, the British band, at one point. So yeah, there's that side of things as well. Antonio says, I use your magic if technique. That's pure gold. Okay, so this is interesting, right? So what he's talking about here is a technique that I talk about actually in the CAD Academy, and I've also written about it and put it into videos and things. And it's not actually my technique, but it's a technique I don't know that anybody else in the space has talked about really. And it was created by Vladimir Stanislavski, who is a great acting tutor, a great classical acting professor, obviously from Moscow, a Russian dude, 19th, early 20th century guy. And his teachings, that may all sound a bit boring and a bit fusty, but his teachings influenced people like Lee Strasberg and who's the other guy, Meisner, who were both more modern American teachers of acting. And these were the dudes who basically taught all of the great method actors from the 1970s. So when you think about people like Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, et cetera, those dudes, they were basically influenced by Stanislavski. Now, Stanislavski, in his book An Actor Prepares, which is a really interesting book if you're in any way into acting theory, he talks about this magic if technique. And this is fundamentally, it's very simple. It's the technique of saying, okay, so what if I was this? What if circumstances were like this? What if I was incredibly confident? What if I was incredibly charismatic? What if I was XYZ, right? And yeah, and so you imagine your way into thinking, okay, well, perhaps I'm feeling very shy at the moment. Perhaps I'm feeling very self-effacing. Perhaps I don't want to go out and face people. But what if I was this incredibly confident Trumpian character, and I felt, I was just so full of myself that I didn't care? What if I was that guy? How would I behave then? And if you can imagine your way into that, then when you go out and you have these kind of interactions, you start to socialize, but you're acting as if you were that dude. It sort of lets you off the hook in a way, because you're acting in the right way that you should. You're acting in a ballsy way. You're acting in a cocky, confident manner, but it's sort of not you that's doing it, because you've taken on this character. You're acting as if you were somebody else, and so that kind of lets you off the hook mentally a little bit. So if you do mess it up, you can kind of think to yourself, well, that doesn't matter because I was just acting as if I was this other dude, right? And mentally, that's a really, really useful trick in social situations to get yourself into the mood, to get yourself into the right headspace. And again, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning with lockdowns easing, you need to be in the right headspace. So if at the moment you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, okay, I get all of this stuff. I get the fact that societies are starting to open up again. I get the fact that I need to be, going out there and grabbing life by the balls and all the rest of it. Sorry. I understand all of that, but I'm feeling existential dread. I'm sitting in that darkened room, shaking, rocking backwards and forwards. just wishing that the lockdown would go on for longer because I don't want to leave my bedroom. I mean, if you're feeling like that, why don't you just be like, all right, well, listen, okay, that's fine. I accept that I feel like that. Things have been difficult currently, and that's just where I am. But when I go out next week, I'm going to act as if I was this dude. I'm going to act as if I was Tyler Durden in Fight Club. I'm going to act as if I was that Tom Cruise character in Magnolia, whatever. It doesn't matter like who it is. You're just going to act as if you were that dude and see what happens. And it's kind of like a social experiment, but you take yourself off the hook because you can think internally, well, I'm doing this as an experiment. I'm doing this to see what happens. Okay. You can do this on nights out. You don't have to act like that guy all of your life. You only have to act like that guy for 6 hours while you're out at the club or whatever. Okay. And it's really, really powerful. It changed everything for me. It's incredibly, it is incredibly powerful. I'm going up and down a little bit here, but Antonio also says, I'm an experienced day gamer, mostly following Thoreau's London day game model. I think it may take some time for girls to be open to cold approaches. They may feel fearful at first due to social distancing. Do you agree? Hard to say. Yes and no is the answer, I suppose. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think the days of I was actually talking to a friend of mine, Dan, who does a lot of the filming for people like Tom, and I've also worked with him and many others who've done videos of going and socially interacting, the sort of like the infill videos and things. And he was saying, yeah, I think exactly what you're saying. I think it's going to take time. I think, the days of just walking up to somebody and starting a conversation are, kind of, well, not numbered, that's the wrong expression, but you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to see that jumping back immediately because of everything that's happened. Some people are going to be wearing masks. Some people are going to be sort of fearful and everything like that. But then on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, like I say, I was out in the park yesterday in central London, and there were hundreds of people out, and it didn't look like a lot of social distancing was going on from what I was seeing. It really didn't. So I think it will be a very useful excuse. I think it'll be a very useful way to push away unwanted attention, because of course you can just say, well, look, this is COVID. What are you doing? Get away from me, kind of thing. So I think it will be certainly useful, like in that sense, right? But if Brad Pitt turned up, if Leo turned up, or one of these dudes, would they be bothered about social distancing? Probably not, So it's really hard to say. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I think from what I've just observed in the last few days, I think you'd be surprised actually how many people just want to get back to normal and just want to forget about the whole thing. And like I say, that kind of fits in with what Daniel Defoe said in his book from the 1700s, which was basically, as soon as it starts to abate, as soon as the infection rate started to go down back in those days, people were out and about and mingling with one another and getting up to all sorts of things. And I'm sure it won't be any different in this case. I think it will have some effects, but I don't think it will necessarily be as marked as you might fear, as you might think. What else have we got? Somebody says Tom Torero is great. Somebody says that's not what heat death means, but okay. Well, if you want to explain, I mean, that was my understanding of it anyway. I mean, listen, I'm not a nuclear physicist or anything. If you want to explain what it does mean, then let us know. But I think in principle, my understanding anyway, and look, my understanding is not great because, as I say, I'm not a science dude at all. My understanding is that eventually the universe will be destroyed. But if you have different information and you can elaborate on that, then let us know, because I'll be interested to know. But anyway, almost regardless of that, the thing about consciousness, I think, can't easily be refuted. I think it's pretty clear that at the point of death, our consciousness is eradicated and we have no awareness. I mean, like, imagine what it was like before you were born, right? Do you remember what it was like before you were born? I can't really. I keep trying. I keep racking my brains, but I can't really remember. And I suspect after death, it's going to be kind of like that. So anything that happens in this world in this life is essentially meaningless when you put it into that context, which is an incredibly freeing thing, which is something we should all be really happy about and celebrate, because it means we can do whatever the hell we like. And it's great, okay? Because, all of that significance you put on yourself, all of that thinking about like, oh, but what about my legacy? And all of that stuff that causes dudes to grow a big beard and go and live in the forest. You don't need to think about any of that because it's all irrelevant. It all doesn't matter. None of it matters. Okay. Okay. Yes, possibly, but watch this space, because I'm basically the whole time I've been looking at this thing and trying to work out exactly what's happening and where it's worth going as well. That's the other thing. I mean, people were talking about Sweden. Sweden has been open this whole time. I know people that have gone over to Sweden. Was it a barrel of laughs over there? I don't really know. I've been trying to get an accurate picture of life on the ground there. I don't know. I think the problem is that even in places where they haven't like officially locked down, people are still locking themselves down a bit. And I even heard this about places in the former Soviet the former Soviet Union. There were places in the former Soviet Union that remained open and that people went to. But even there, even though they were open and there wasn't like a lockdown in the sense that we had here, people were still keeping off the streets. The bars and the cafes weren't as busy and all that kind of thing. So in terms of planning for travel, you've got to think, or the issue, I suppose, over this period has been to think, well, like, even if I could go somewhere, where would I really go that would be kind of worth it? I mean, all I've done is stayed in London and done a load of work. And actually, it's been a really profitable period. I've been very lucky in that regard. And I'm very grateful for that. And for people on here who've supported me with like CAD Club and CAD Academy and things like that. So CAD Club, then don't say that. That's Christian McQueen's old thing. With the Charisma and Dating Academy, it's been a really good period for me work-wise, actually. But some of the thinking behind that has been like, well, even if you do go somewhere, where's it actually going to be worth going? Of course, now it's a slightly different story because places are properly opening up, and it feels like some of the fear is starting to eradicate. So yeah, things are changing now. He's asking about Patreon. Okay, so listen, here's a bit of news, right? I've actually shifted off of Patreon. And I've shifted it to Gumroad, and I've got the membership site on there. Now, I decided to do it. I've been thinking about it over the last few months, and I just basically did it last week. So I need to take down the links to Patreon, really, because I'm not going to be putting out new content on Patreon anymore. I'm going to be doing it via Gumroad. And what I basically do is I'll do an exclusive video once a week, other exclusive content as well, and that's a minimum, by the way. I'll maybe do a couple of videos per week some weeks. I also want to do more written content, sort of like exclusive articles, maybe some audio, stuff like that. But the main thing is that I'm going to be doing at least one Zoom call, like Zoom webinar per month with the group. So that is the main thing to get on, because the webinars that we did for the CAD Academy were really, really good. Even though, I mean, there was about 20 people on most of the calls, which is pretty small actually compared to John Modern Life Dating's body language mastery ones, and I think Pandemic Pickup. Those webinar groups have been massive, really, really big. Like, I don't know what he's doing now, but up to 200 people, maybe more. Certainly the BLM ones that I was on, you're talking about 100 people or more sometimes. So really, really big. The one that I did for Charisma and Dating Academy was about 20 people, which is quite small in comparison to that. But they were really, really awesome groups. I mean, they were like, people were really engaged. People were talking. I mean, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. We got some guests over. Ryan Stone came over. John Modern Life Dating came over. Myron, if he's still watching, he came over as well. They did some great sessions. So it was brilliant. And look, I mean, Charisma and Dating Academy will only grow as Body Language Mastery grew, as we go into the next enrollment, which will be in the summer at some point. So, in the next quarter at some point. So yeah, you know, I mean, you start somewhere, right? But that 20 people, that was an amazing group. It was a really, really great group. So what I want to do is to continue that on a monthly basis, and as I say, maybe more than monthly. I need to gauge it. But yeah, we'll be doing those Zoom webinars. So that is one of the key things that you get with the membership. So I'll put the link to that below this video. I actually need to change the link on the in the description to this, and apologies for that, because I think it still says Patreon. I need to change those Patreon links. But yeah, the action is now at Gumroad, but you get instant access, you get all that free content, you get access to previous content that I've done, all the books, old videos, things like that. So you do get a lot, but I think the real thing is the Zoom webinars, which is basically a group coaching session, if you like. So whatever problems that you've got in terms of dating, game, all that stuff, you know, you bring it to the group, and we'll sort them out for you. So it's gonna be awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, so we've been on about an hour now, actually, so I'll probably finish in just a moment. Adam says, I can't see it being fun anywhere until next spring. Well, let's not be too pessimistic. I mean, like I said, even in London's still in lockdown. And even here, there was a lot of fun going on yesterday. So I wouldn't be too pessimistic, because I think, and I could be wrong, and I really hope I'm not, but I could be wrong. I think we're starting to see this thing recede, and I think people's fear is starting to recede, certainly amongst the somewhat younger generation, let's say. And as I say, I don't think you can hold the human spirit down for too long. So I don't think it's going to be like it was last year, but I don't think we need to be too pessimistic about things either. Yeah, Greek tourists might be open for British tourists. Malia used to be a big thing back in the day. Loads of people would go to Malia. You don't hear about it that much now. Is it still good over there? People used to go to Malia. It was almost as big as something like Faliraki for a while, wasn't it? But yeah. Is anybody else? So Bruno's come back and he said, indirect game, I feel it's almost a pussy way of saying what you want. Too many guys pussyfoot around when going indirect. Yeah, I broadly speaking, I would agree with that. I think that's absolutely true. I went into a long sort of preamble about the different interpretations of it and when you can use it and stuff. But yeah, I think there's some truth in that for sure. But you know, having said that, if you go with a sort of cocky way, then you know, it can work as well as anything. So you know, I think the main thing is don't pussyfoot around. Yeah. So you might as well do it up front. Oh right, here we go. So he's come back. The theory is supposedly when there's no extra energy left in the universe that's necessary to cause movement in life, so everything just freezes. It's called thermodynamic equilibrium. Okay, well that's interesting. Thank you for that. I need to look into this more, because you're right. I shouldn't really be quoting it if I can't really back it up. But you know, I was using it more in a colloquial sense than anything. Roosh will end the universe. Yeah, quite possibly. Cool. Okay. Well, listen. Anyway, on that note, thanks very much for tuning in. As I say, the membership area is $49 a month, unless you're on my subscription email list, which is free, or unless you're in CAD Academy. And I will put the link for that below this video. So look at that. And you do get that Zoom call every month, as well as access to all of that content, that exclusive content, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, Renegade Dating Blueprint, the collection of 11 books, you can still get that for $39. Again, the link is below. And that's it, really. But thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try and do these all this week. So be back again tomorrow at about the same time. And yeah, if you've got any questions, get them ready for that. And I hope that you enjoy this continued easing of this lockdown period. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.